All right, Marcus. So why Jumpstart Nova now?
Timing is always important when it comes to launching a product into the market. And Jumpstart Nova as a fund is a product for our limited partners. I would say in that respect, the timing couldn't be better. The pandemic really brought about two primary issues, I think, to the forefront of America throughout 2020. One was the importance of healthcare and how healthcare really underpins everything, especially our economy. And also that there have been many aspects of racial equity in America that haven't properly been worked through. And so, as that discussion was going on, here I am. I'm a Black healthcare venture capital fund manager in Nashville, Tennessee, and in the Southeast United States. And Jumpstart Nova was kind of the result of conversations that I was privileged to be able to have based on who was in my life, in my circle, and that I had access to, as well as the platform that Vic Gatto and I had built for the last 7 years in Jumpstart Health Investors. Our ability to build a new fund pretty quickly and get it live. So that's kind of a roundabout answer as to why now. Yeah.
So now look, I'll come from a place of ignorance. I'm just curious in this side of it. So entrepreneurs, I think, struggle. To your point, you mentioned the issues, the many issues that we're having in this country around equity, and that could be a whole discussion in and of itself.
No question.
What's the lead if we think about it from a journalistic perspective? I mean, do you find a sense of responsibility being an entrepreneur, an African-American entrepreneur? Like, where does all of that sort of fit for you? Because, when all of these things have happened in society over the last, let's just say 2-3 years, you saw all of these small companies, you saw companies of all shapes and sizes trying to figure out how in the world do they communicate that they don't support violence or, discrimination, all these sorts of things. And, and I'm sure you were privy to these conversations like so many, reading the article or listening to this conversation, that how do we come across that we actually have an understanding, a sensibility about us, that we are not ignorant. We maybe never communicated our support, but now you've got a Black-led fund, right, to support so many elements of healthcare, and you're doing it from the investment. I just feel like it's such an incredible story. It has so many layers, and I'm wondering what's the lead for you? Is it that you're a Black entrepreneur? Is it that you're an entrepreneur? Like, how do you think about that, and what sense of responsibility do you feel now that you are leading the charge?
I think the being an entrepreneur was sort of a requisite to my ability to do it. It probably is more about the fact that I'm a venture investor, right? So there's a bit of a power dynamic there in terms of writing checks into companies, and companies need capital in order to break into markets like healthcare. And also that I was at a point in my career in 2020 where I had not arrived in, let's say, 2010, where my network and my influence and my ability to have conversations really at the highest levels of the healthcare industry, particularly in Nashville, was there. So you just have to ask yourself, if someone is going to have a conversation about capital allocation and the obvious documented disparities in capital allocation in venture capital, which are even worse in healthcare venture capital, right? If someone's going to be able to have that conversation, if it's not me, then who? And I'm not saying I am the only one, because there are other Black healthcare venture fund managers in America that are launching great funds right now. But in Nashville, it was really my opportunity, obligation, and responsibility, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There wasn't really a second person there to step in and do that.
So I'm glad you brought up Nashville. Obviously, that's the backdrop for both you and I. Just coincidence in that regard. But at what point, so you may blush at this, but I mean this sincerely, just from the Nashville community. At what point did you sit back and realize or recognize that your name in and of itself is a brand? I know I'm making the leap that it has that kind of weight here in the local economy, and I don't think I would be alone in that. And I'm wondering if And it's not, I don't think it's about ego. I think it's about understanding, in essence, what can you do? And maybe that did influence, Jumpstart Nova, because you say, if you've got it, why not sort of go for it, leverage it?
Well, totally. So I think what I was doing professionally at the time when the pandemic hit and it started really is the answer to your question, which is I was publishing a book. So as an author, you have to be in the mindset that your name is a brand, regardless of, what someone might say, oh, Marcus Whitney, you're always in the Business Journal, your name equals this. If you take all that to the side, I was in the middle of publishing a book. Literally, I published my book in June 2020, right? George Floyd
was
murdered.
Create and orchestrate, right?
Yeah, that's right. Create and orchestrate, right? And George Floyd was murdered in May of 2020. So I'm in this position where I'm 30 days out from launching my book, and America is in turmoil, like literally
imploding.
Yeah, right. And so I thought about it more as influence and responsibility than a brand. It's really easy post-launch with all this nice press, and we're not sort of in the middle of the throes of that moment. But if we try to take ourselves back to that moment, it was much more about, okay, I can have conversations. I'm being invited to conversations. Very powerful, wealthy white men are calling me to have conversations because they don't understand what's happening in this moment, right? So it's very clear I have an opportunity to establish a reality that previously maybe people weren't that open to receiving and to hearing. But the moment in America, which was much bigger than Marcus Whitney, created an opportunity for me and so many other people around the country in their communities, right? I mean, Nashville is just one town. There are so many other people in so many other communities that had to feel the same way I felt. Like, okay, here I am in this position, in these rooms, with this influence, with this ability to start a conversation and to say the thing that hasn't been said, because if I had said it before, it really wouldn't have landed well.
And what was that like when you're getting those phone calls? I'm so curious. When you're getting phone calls, your words, high-powered, wealthy, white individuals that are wanting sort of, I guess, perspective. I don't know exactly what they're looking for.
By the way, these are also friends of mine. So, they wouldn't have called if it was just a brand. These are people who I know.
But does that change the value, the dynamic of the value or the perceived value in the conversation? It feels like, well, I do business with you now for this reason, and oh my goodness, now here's another reason why I'm going to call you. I mean, how do you internalize that so that you can continue those relationships, because they are friends, but they're probably topics that you'd never broached before?
Yeah, but I think as long as you can accept people having great intentions in their outreach and their seeking to understand, then it's really not a problem, right? Yeah. I'll tell you this, I didn't look at it as an opportunity for catharsis. You know what I mean? I looked at it as an opportunity to bridge a gap and to help them to understand the thing they called me to better understand.
Have you seen changes in those relationships for the better?
Yeah, I mean, 1,000%. I mean, I think to a T, every one of those people who called me is a limited partner of the fund. So that's sort of one. That's one measurable manifestation of what I think you're asking for.
Yeah, the trust on both sides of that. I mean, it does. In the beginning, I think people were so uncomfortable, right? No matter where they sort of what role they occupied, what race they were, any of that. It's sort of, gosh, this is a new environment.
People don't want to be called bad or evil for things that they don't feel they personally did.
Yeah, don't you think it's about intent, right? That there is
yes, that's right, and that's one of those things that, like, it just is, right? Like I don't really get into psychological debates about whether or not I shouldn't say psychological, I should say philosophical. I don't get into philosophical debates about whether or not that is okay or that should be, or people should feel a sense of responsibility. I'm much more focused on efficacy, and I'm much more pragmatic. I'm a programmer. You know what I mean? So my thing is, what's going to move things forward? Yeah. You know, if I'm going to take the calculated risk to write a letter that's going to be public, and inherently not because I'm intending to, but because the topic is so tightly wound, right? Has the potential to be controversial. I'm doing it with the intent of trying to move a conversation forward in as pragmatic a way as I possibly can. Okay. Again, I'm not in this for catharsis. I do jujitsu for catharsis. I have other healthy.
You have other means to be able to do that.
Correct.
Let's talk about, Marcus, your relationship to success. I think, entrepreneurs is very interesting, right? It's 24/7. It's 7 days a week. It's, losing friends, gaining friends. Just, you learn so much about yourself. You kind of put yourself through the ringer. And I think the relationship that one has with success and failure on the other side of the coin can be very compelling in retrospect when we think about the arc. How have you related to success, and what is your relationship currently to success?
Success by what measure?
I guess what you would define.
Yeah,
is it hard? Is it hard with every sort of win that maybe, everything being equal, someone might deem something as a win? Jumpstart Nova, these sorts of things. You overperform a fund, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, can you celebrate? What's that relationship like?
Those things, I have to be really honest. Like those things, I think one of the things we're starting to have a conversation about in America with regards to mental health is that those things actually don't make you happy. I think mastery makes you happy because it makes you feel fulfilled. And so when I think about entrepreneurship, if you ask me like over the course of my career, for me, the thing that you're pointing to when you say success to me is mastery, meaning I am a much better, more efficient, more accurate, more effective entrepreneur today than I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And that feels really nice because I'm now able to balance entrepreneurship with other things in my life in a much healthier way and still be better at entrepreneurship. It's like when I started, I had to spend all this time doing it. I was very, very clumsy. I had to spend less time with my family, less time with my friends. I had very unhealthy habits. It was a real struggle. Through lots of lessons and some wins and losses, successes and failures, whatever, over a prolonged period of time, I've developed what I believe is mastery, right? Which means when I approach a new business idea, look, Jumpstart Nova from idea to launch is not 2 years old, and so that's efficient. That's the level of capability I have right now, is like.
Would that speak to the, again, from afar, this sort of portfolio approach that it looks like your career has taken? You are a co-founder and minority owner with the National Soccer Club, so now we're into pro sports. Does that provide a balance for you, sort of on a I don't know, maybe a social emotional level, right? It just provides some level of balance. Is it good for business? Like, what's the reason to diversify as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think for me, again, it's been an exploration and getting to mastery. And part of this is mastery of self, right? And so one of the things that I know is that I'm very, very good at getting things off the ground. So I've actually now landed, interestingly, with both Jumpstart Health Investors as a platform and Jumpstart Nova specifically as a fund. I've now very much landed in something I can do for a very long period of time because it's a seed and Series A stage venture business. So I'm in the business of helping other entrepreneurs launch things, like kind of in perpetuity. It's like when they get to real escape velocity, my job with them kind of stops. So my job is now to manage a portfolio, right? So I've taken the thing that I was doing through a myriad of different ventures, and I've now just organized it under a simple structure that I can now stick with and grow
Does it provide you an opportunity, Marcus, to serve as this may sound like I'm dumbing it down, but almost as a mentor or a coach to those that you bring in?
1,000%. I mean, to me, but also a partner. I mean, there's a thing there when it comes to like mentor and coach. I would say in some cases, right? I would say in some cases I'm going to find incredible entrepreneurs who are experienced, and we'll be fortunate to be able to invest in those companies, and maybe I'll learn something from them. You know what I mean? Hopefully I'll learn something from them. Hopefully I'll learn something from all my portfolio founders, right? I mean, so I think it's a mutual relationship. I love peer mentorship, and so I kind of think about it that way. I think a lot of people think about mentors as like sort of a superior and an underling kind of power dynamic. But some of the most important mentor relationships in my life have been very close friends who were all at the same age ranges. We all are sort of experiencing the same things, but we have different perspectives, different life experiences, and so we can hold each other accountable to things. And so, from that perspective, I would say yes when it comes to mentorship and when it comes to coaching, right? I don't mean the power dynamic is such that, they're coming to me for guidance because I'm Yoda or something like that.
Let's talk about blind spots. When you're working with an entrepreneur, are you noticing any trends with regards to blind spots that entrepreneurs have at a certain stage that you may have gone through, that you've recognized and developed a mastery in, at least the recognition and then the pivot from?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Big time. I mean, a pretty long list. I mean, my book is a lot about the lessons that I learned and the failures, because I am a college dropout. I don't have formal training in business. So everything I've learned on my own. Thankfully, we have the internet, so you can learn a lot through the internet. But a lot of it is lived experience and like, oh, a balance sheet. What's that? How does that work? You know what I mean? And so a lot of the lessons that I've learned, I did articulate in the book. But most of them have to do with self-mastery, self-awareness, and saving yourself from yourself. Your own. There's a very, very thin line between confidence and arrogance. Founders have to be confident because you're doing something that is fundamentally against the odds, and has a million reasons why it could go wrong. So you have to be confident, but there's just a thin line between confidence and arrogance, and you being really, really sure. And I think this is where the one dynamic I can say is that when you're talking about mentoring and coaching, for a particular age does matter, right? Lived experience and age does matter. And also, how many times have you done this before? If an entrepreneur in our portfolio, this is not their first rodeo, then there's a completely different way that we're collaborating. If it is their first rodeo, I'm absolutely asking them the things that I should have been asked 10, 15 years ago, right? Because there's no way you will know these things until you've gone through them. And they're in every category. They're in leadership, they're in finance, they're in operations, they're in how you grow, they're in your product, your service, your sales, your marketing, those 8 areas. There's a million things you think you know and you don't know, Yeah. And the pattern recognition of those things only comes through having experienced it.
Let's close with this, Marcus. If I could get inside your head, I had access maybe to the innermost thoughts that you have. What area do you wrestle with personally when you think about, yes, I've accomplished a great deal, but this is sort of my next path. If I move the goalpost on the horizon that I'm looking out at, gosh, this is what I want to tackle. If I think about mastery, like what's the next for you?
Yeah. I am really looking at how I perform every day in every segment of the day, to include this call, right? So we're about at the end. I'm sorry I was late, but I feel like I gave you really good answers to your questions. So I'll take that and I'll move into the next thing, right? And that's kind of where I am. I'm not that far out because at this point I kind of know where I'm going. It's already pretty much laid out. My job is to
a better sense of self, right? Comfortable in your own skin, right?
Half hour to half hour, nail it. You know what I mean? That's my job. That's my job.
Well, you nailed it. So we're gonna stop there. I'll stop recording.